Maybe we can mute.
Good afternoon, everyone. Looks like we still have some people joining in, so we'll give it a minute or two and let people get settled in before we get started.
Manager Lopez, good afternoon. It's Chief Sell. Chief Lloyd is also going to join since the Fire Prevention Bureau might be working with some of these partners. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. We'll have introductions at the very front side. Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? This meeting is being recorded so that if anybody joins later and isn't able to catch the front side of this meeting, we will have it available for those that weren't able to join entirely through. So thanks for being here. I'm Chris Lopez, City Manager for the City of Hemet, and we're excited to have this orientation today, this afternoon, to go over the application procedures and guidelines for a commercial cannabis business permit in the City of Hemet. This has been a long time coming in the sense of a lot of work has gone in to get us to this point, so we're happy to have you here. With that being said, we've got most of our staff that's involved throughout this process on the line, and so I'd like to have them introduce themselves as well as their staff. So we'll go ahead and get started with the fire department. Chief Sell, if you can introduce yourself and any teammates that you have on the call.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. Eddie Sell, Fire Chief, City of Hemet Fire Department. And joining me should also be Battalion Chief Greg Lloyd, and he is our Bureau Head for the Fire Prevention and All Hazards Bureau. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Now we'll go over to the police department and have our police department police chief introduce himself and his team.
Hi, this is Chief Eddie Poost in the police department. Today it'll only be myself. I have my captains dealing with some other permanent issues, so I'll be relaying the information to them later on.
Thank you, Chief. Now we'll go over to community development, and we'll start with Community Development Director King to introduce himself and his team.
Good afternoon. My name is HP King. I'm the Community Development Director, and with me I have our Principal Planner, Monique Alanis-Flater. We have our Senior Planner, Nina Morgan, and we also have Sarah Retmeyer, our Building Official, as well as our Code Manager, Lionel Martinez, as well as some of our planning staff that are joining in.
Thank you, HP. Now we'll go over to the Finance Department and our Finance Director. Could you introduce yourself and your team, please?
Good afternoon, I'm Lorena Rocha. I'm the Finance Director for the City of Hemet, and I don't have any team members on today.
Great, thank you, Lorena. And then finally, we'll wrap it up with our City Attorney, Stephen Graham. Could you go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody that's here?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stephen Graham, and I am the City Attorney for the City of Hemet.
Great, thank you, Stephen. So as you can see, we've got a pretty robust team here to provide some background as needed for the process so that everyone has an understanding of what the process is all about, and then gets an understanding of what this is all inclusive with. With that being said, I wanted to just walk everybody through some of the processes that we've gone through to get to this point. Obviously, this began with the passage of Prop 64 in 2016 related to the legalization of the Adult Use of Marijuana Act. Shortly thereafter, the city of Hemet voters did approve its own voter-approved initiative within the city of Hemet. Shortly thereafter, we began a outreach program to develop gather input from the community, as well as from the council related to a cannabis regulatory framework for the city of Hemet. During that time, we brought on HDL as a consultant to help gather the input and provide recommendations based on the council's priorities. After that, in May of 2021, the council adopted ordinance 1977 by adding Article 16 concerning the regulation of cannabis businesses within the city of Hemet. In August of 2021, the council adopted Resolution 21-088, which established the review criteria for commercial cannabis businesses. And then the council also adopted Resolution 2021-089, which established the application fees for commercial cannabis businesses in the city of Hemet. And then on October 12th, the council adopted Resolution 2021-098, setting the cannabis business license tax rate for the city of Hemet. All those steps have gotten us to this point today, where we will be discussing the commercial cannabis business application license process and everything within that framework. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce David Mcpherson. David Mcpherson is with HDL. He has taken the community input on the front side, the council direction that we've had over the last couple of years to get us to this point, and was involved in the application process and all steps throughout this entire cannabis topic. So with that being said, I would like to introduce David Mcpherson from HDL to go ahead and begin this process. So David, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Appreciate it. And we also appreciate you guys with your patience on this. As you know, it's been a long, difficult process of just the time it takes to do all the vetting and get all the stakeholders and input to where we are today. And it's important that we got to where we are by doing that process. So what we're going to, really the primary focus here today is to make sure we answer your questions. So even though we have forms, some of you may have been to similar processes before. There are some unique things to the city of Hemet, but we also want to make sure we get your questions answered. So not only to expedite them, but also that everyone can try to get them up front, that they hear from different angles of issues that come about from different inquiries or questions. So the first thing I want to just point out to you, it's kind of critical, important, because we do have a lot of staff on this phone, is that we really need to have all the questions go into one central location. The city has spent some time discussing how to delve out those questions as they come in. And as you notice, there's different SMEs for different areas. And so by all the questions going to the same location, then they will be provided to the specific areas in which to respond to the question, and then create it in a Q&A, so that if it's individual from one business asks a question, at the end of the day, it needs to go into a Q&A in response. So all applicants have an opportunity to see the questions and the responses. So there's consistency on how we provide information into that. And then it will streamline the process for you, so you don't have resubmittals with that. And so up above here, you'll see where email is, where we have cannabis@hemetca.us. That is where we need to send things and consolidate that. If you send it to a staffer because you have their email or whatever without direction, you may not get a response. The second important reason why we have to have that is, should we have any inquiries for public record requests, anything else, we have everything in the same place, and it helps the city comply with the requirements and not be looking at individual emails in order to get there. The second thing, as you see here, is we already kicked off the date, January 10th, a couple of days ago. Reason why we waited a few days to let you kind of soak in and absorb some of this information, so that if you did have questions, you'd be able to ask them And so we go through this and then get a chance to filter through that. All the forms that you are going to be required to submit or provide are listed here. They're all on the city website. If you haven't already pulled them off. The city manager indicated some of the ordinances or things that are there, but then the other forms are also on there as well. If you do not see them, please let staff know, but we've already looked at them and they should all be there accordingly for that purpose. And then as the questions I mentioned, the Q&As will come up, answer, responded. Staff is going to probably timely as best they can. It may not be every day. It could be every couple of days. It could be once a week based on the volume of questions that come up, but they will add the updates on the frequently asked questions. So as you see here in this red emphasis here, is it is your responsibility to check this on occasion to make sure that if there's any updates that are going to be pertinent to you, especially as you put your application together, that you don't waste any time as far as putting in the wrong information if there's something that happens. We're here today, the kickoff, this is as we mentioned here, and we mentioned all the forms, so don't need to reiterate that. So we appreciate here. And if you have colleagues that couldn't make this call, as the city manager said, we are recording this. It will be available. Today was not a mandatory requirement. It's again for try to assist you and provide you some guidance. And so if you need some of your colleagues or consultants or anyone that this would be beneficial to them, you could direct them after a couple of days to when this gets posted to the video will be there, or if you kind of need to go back and look at things that we've discussed today. So the limitations. So as you know, that for those of you that want to do retail of any sort, it needs to be a secondary to where to the businesses. So if you do a cultivation or manufacturing or any of the ones that are permitted distribution, it's got to be incidental to that, since this is going to be in the zone out by the airport. And so it's the criteria that has been provided to that is 40%. And that is of the licensed premise. So whatever diagrams or area you're going to present to the state and to the city as your location or licensed premises, that doesn't mean premises that you're saying that it's the whole parking lot and a 1 acre that you're on, but the actual licenses significantly smaller in a building or structures, then you need to make sure that you're complying with that in order to meet the requirement to have a retail, either storefront or non-storefront for that purposes, and only specifically for that purpose if you're going to do the retail. The second part of this is the amendments. Since this is not a competitive process, it's more of a quality control, quality check component of this. We have set the standard for this purposes at 80%. And so the criteria that we have put together, you have to have it meet that criteria. If you just try to throw something together and the quality is not there, you are going to get it back. We're not here to do your homework for you. So it will be important that you do that. If you resubmit it, we will provide you a supplemental of what needs to be cured, and you could resubmit that and update your application information to us. If you still just do a haphazard job on it and you still do not score the 80%, we are not going to score it or review it a third time. You will have to reapply. So the lesson we'll learn that if you want to pay the fees for this, which I believe is around $8,500 and plus whatever other cost to it, you would have to reapply. So it's going to be important that you do your best the first time around, and if you missed a few things that don't get you to that quality control threshold, that when you do get the responses for that you do a good job in making sure it's going to meet that the second time around, because there will be no third time for the same application. Doesn't mean you're denied or disqualified. It just means you have to reapply and reset it and go through that process again for that. So the city rights or reservations, as you know, many things happen in this world of cannabis regulations, policies, things that may at the state level, legislation, federal law, anything in there, so that the city holds a right to have any reservations should there be anything occur that may have to freeze the process, suspend the process, terminate the process up to the point of where a license is provided to you. No difference as you would be in any other agency. It's just things beyond the city's control that may occur, or things that are out there that are unforeseen that may require this. Not that the reservations of a pause, but as you know, we've gone through a COVID situation, and sometimes city hall is not available, or the staffing or anything limitations. There might be those pauses due to things, again, from that perspective as well, that we hope things get better for us all related to that. So the application process, as the city manager indicated, which section of the ordinance, again, they're on the website. They're all cited, all the documentations on there are up there. So you have that. So the submittals are listed here, and each form. So when you go through this checklist, make sure that you're following it. Look at the descriptions that we say of how you have to conform to them, how you have to look at them, making sure you get everything there, how you would submit it to the city through here, and you need to have the package together. If you accidentally forget your security plan or forget something you submitted, and it's not going to be a late adding it in, it's going to be reviewed. You'll get dinged below the 80%. You're missing a whole section because you didn't scan it in or put it. You'll get it back commenting missing security plan, and then you just got to submit it, and hopefully it gets you past the 80% again. Because once the city provides it to us to review, we're not going to go back and review it, or a section or pieces are missing. If you, let's say, a 40-page scan security and you miss 15 pages in a scan or something, we will look for the completion of it as best we can. But if you wanted to expand on something, or you left something out, then you may have to have the cure process, and then goes towards reflects that 80%. So make sure everything's there. When it comes to just the forms itself, these are just more, procedural things. It will be important that we have this in order to make sure you have everything. So check your boxes, make sure you got everything in there, and included in that. We do want it in a flash drive. We do not want it in a Word document. PDF is what we need in order to transfer it, secure it, in order to get it from the city to us. We do it through a secure file with the integrity and the safety of your information, but we also need to be able to move it to review it. So as you can see here, we don't need a 400-page thing. We're looking, in the recent years, we know that it can be done under 200 pages, but that is the scored elements, sections 1 through 7 in the appendix. And we'll go into the appendix, so you'll see that as outlined. But any financial records, backgrounds, capitalization, verification, proof of all those pages, documents, as you see here, do not count to the 200 pages. To make it simplified, the 200 pages is the appendix. The criteria that we're going to be looking at is where we want you to keep it under that for the purpose of what we're looking for in there. So make sure that it's there. And then how you present the materials on that flash drive, we try to make it a little more clear for you so you can check it off, make sure you have them in the right files here. You can see each one of the pages. So you might want to, as you print maybe a hard copy of all the forms, kind of look at it, and maybe on your scratch notes say, okay, PDF file number 1, and you kind of know it, check it and set it aside, right? PDF file number 2, and you kind of know how you frame it when you put it together, so you don't accidentally send something in an area. Why is that important? Because if we go looking for, again, your security plan, and you stuck it in PDF file 5, we're not going to go looking at that, after the reviewers don't get all the information, because this is broken up in different areas. The evaluator reviewer is looking at PDF file number 2 and not looking at other files, and they're not going to be looking at it. So why I put it in there, it's in file 4. Well, didn't follow the instructions. So this is to help you be able to get through the process more. And I know time is money for you, so you want to make sure that you're following how we have this put together. And then the background check, in order to comply with that, there's kind of a two-step process. So the first part of it is kind of a high-end provisional license. So we have a portal link here that goes to HDL. You can go on and take a look at the information in case you can't get started on it, but you have information you need to gather. You can always stop in the middle of it and go back to it if you had to. But that is to fill out. The background will be a provisional look at the information that HDL will do a high level, making sure that there's nothing out there concerned from the police department. That information will be provided to the police department. And then as you get closer to doing, getting your permit, then that's when the police department will coordinate with you and say, okay, you move along far enough along, you're in compliance with everything else, then they will make an appointment, have you make an appointment to get your live scan done for to the next step to finalize the background component. So again, the background component is a two-step. Initially, it's going to go through the HDL portal to do the background, provided information to the police department, which will cover more than just any convictions associated with that. And then the live scan will be the backside component of this prior to issuing of the license to any of the owners and people that meet the definition that are required to have a background, which could include other people. So make sure you look at who is required to do the background by definition of the two sections up here, 18506 and 18531K. Okay, and then just as a footnote, for those that are required by employees as you get up and running, down the road as you're starting to look at that, then they would be subject to at least going through the background, not necessarily the other component of that. So the most important is the front end stuff because of where these are zoned, and more important, investing is the zoning verification letter. And so I emphasize that because for those of you that have maybe started already looking for property, have had discussion with property owners, you can't rely on them of saying, oh yeah, this is okay, it's properly zoned, it's going to meet the requirements for you to do that. You go and sign a lease, you sign maybe even potential purchase property, all that to find out that it's not zoned to do cannabis. So we highly encourage you to make sure that the zoning verification letter is done. You've done the process with the planning division in order to make sure that component is first done. So if you have to go look for another property, you're not wasting time, and more importantly, you haven't invested time trying to go through a contractual agreement with a property that's not going to be viable. And that's very critical. And we have had that occur. So, it's a painful thing, the lesson learned and time. Of course, this is not, because it's not a merit process, you're not as time sensitive, but we do know how difficult it is to go through that process on the property side. Then there are a variety of fees here. As some of you that have attended the council meetings, discussed the total cost. It's kind of the total burden cost of developing the program, the fees, staff's burden costs, our time associated with this, of how we've come up to the $8,500 because we've streamlined and not having to go through, a couple more phases of competitive process. The prices come down a little bit, so that helps you there. And then, as we mentioned, the zoning verification letter. This is the cost of $175. So you got an $8,500 cost for the application itself, which must be submitted with the application. And you have the zoning verification letter, which is what you're going to pay as you request the zoning verification, which is before you're really going to submit the information. So if you go down our contact planning tomorrow and say, hey, I need to get a zoning verification letter for this 100 Main Street, that's $175 there. The $8,500 will come when you submit the application, and they will have a zoning verification letter in there. The background check, as we mentioned, you go on the portal, so you just have to have that done before you submit your application to the city, because as one of those the PDF files, it says that you need to have the receipt. So if let's say you had 3 owners, all 3 of you need to go on there, do the background, pull that, you will get a receipt for your submittal of completing the information on there. Those receipts that you paid, it verifies and validates that you done and met all the requirements to submit the background on the front end in order to submit that with your package. And then how you submit the fees. So the fees will only be done by a certified check, cashier's check, or money order payable to the city. They will not be accepting cash, especially since we are in a COVID environment, trying to eliminate some of that. And just the volume of cash during this process, it's going to be limited to just this process at this time. So the termination of eligibility and the scoring process, again, phase one is really a matter of just a complete package, making sure that you've provided everything in the right orders and the categories. You've met the qualifications, clarifications of the submittal information, and anything that was updated during the process would be, because there's a little uniqueness because of the criteria here, other than the scoring component, just the criteria questions that might be asked to the planning division or staff in general that we may have anticipated that come up. There might be updates to that. So make sure that there's consistency on there. And then the full package of all those documents we did, that's the complete. That means you've done your zone verification letter, you've done your background, and you've completed everything and put everything in the PDF file sections as we requested from you. And then once we get that full package, it'll move forward into the process. In phase two, as we kind of talked about, but just kind of the breakdown of here in the sections, and we'll go a little more on the appendix as far as, showing it to you and have some general conversation if you have questions, is just this different sections that are in Appendix A. They're scored, and again, quality control, really to just make sure that you understand the dynamics and the needs of the city's discussions from a policy standpoint, the concerns from the safety and security, and then concerns regarding just what you're going to contribute and or the location specific that you're selecting. So the city and has a good understanding that you understand the potential benefits or impacts to all of the scenarios associated with the location that you pick, and address the policy questions or concerns the council and the community has had through this whole vetting process. When that is done, the applications are scored, looked at, and if so, in which case, if you complete everything, you move on to phase three. Upon completion of that, city manager, the designee, will award the permit. They'll validate there's been no changes, that, depending on the length of time it takes you to do that, things change, issues occur. Unfortunately, there's concerns. Recently we've had applicants go through process and they've been some illegal activity prior to joining businesses. Partners get into fights, buyouts, consolidations, lease agreements, all kinds of things come in there. So staff will do their due diligence in the city manager to make sure that everything that you said in your application is still correct, up to date, current, no compliance of anything, no change of anything, nothing that they need to be concerned at that doesn't get brought up during any of this process, so that if there is anything there before the issuance of that you'll get your permit. If for some reason it is determined that there is a disqualification or a denial, then you have the process as noted here that's in the ordinance, that could be an appeal from a hearing officer that will be determined for the denial or disqualification of that. So, make sure that you're thinking that through. Don't rush things or ignore something that you think is pertinent, especially since this is not a merit process. You've got more to lose by not updating and making current any changes that need to be done or brought to the attention. But hopefully you've got those done and the smooth process continues for you. And then also, just because you submit this is the regulatory component of this. It does not constitute that you will automatically, be issued a permit or complies with any other requirements from the planning division, planning commissions, any requirements for building code, fire code, any other requirements that you need, that you may submit to, that whatever you need to, that's being asked. We've got the planning department here, we got the fire department here, and police department. If there's anything in there that needs to be done city protocols or requirements, permits, fees, delinquencies, outstanding debt for anything else that you're part of. It needs to be, make sure it's taken care of before you move on there. And as we mentioned, again, try to send everything to the cannabis website unless otherwise directed. But it's important that you do so that your question gets answered appropriately by the appropriate staff as you go through this process. So here's the appendix that we mentioned, just kind of a more higher, a detail of what we went to going through this. But the first thing I want to point out to you as those have been through this in other areas, the city has to be transparent a lot of what it gets and doesn't do by law. And so there is the Public Records Act. So anything that you provide to the city is going to be subject to a Public Records Act. So if you have anything that you feel is confidential, proprietary, or things that you feel are not should be disclosed, put on their confidential, proprietary, and that way it's flagged for the sole purpose of that. If there is a public records request, the staff will reach out to applicants and just notify them that if they wish to try to get any legal, take any injunction relief or any recourse or proactive order to say, hey, no, we don't want this information being released, we object to it, then you are doing that on your own dime. And before the city has to submit the stuff and meet the compliance for the public records request. So make sure it's noted in there, and then the city will have that information. Specifically, if you clearly define what is confidential or proprietary to you, it doesn't mean that from the public side that they would consider that that's not their right to have it, but at least it would red flag to city staff and city attorney that red flags that they need to take a double look at it before releasing it, and why you would be concerned with that specifically, and try to accommodate you, protecting your proprietary confidential information as possible. Now, with that said, financial information, specific security information that would jeopardize your business if somebody had something specifically to your operations, typically are not subject to public requests, but just for due diligence, we want to make sure we're covered on both ends. At the end of the day, this is to protect you as well in your business and anything that's important to you on there. So the business plans are going to be uniquely different by the categories that you look at, right? So there's generic information of you, of your business, the qualifications of owners, proof of capitalization, pro forma plan. So we recognize that you've demonstrated that you understand that what you're building out and what you're going to make in the realistic expectations of it, your timelines. And it also gives the city an understanding of some of the challenges you're going to run in with the specific location, and some of the stuff that they're going to have to anticipate as well in there. But when it comes to specifically 1.6 and below, you can see that 1.6 is specifically things that we're just trying to identify how you're going to address things so that they not only meet the ordinance, but also meets policy direction and the public safety and welfare of the type of business you're opening. And for those that have not ever been through an HCL process, the goal also is to do twofold. One, make sure you comply with the city's requirements. But when you get to, if you get awarded a license or a permit, when you get to the state, you've really done you've already done the bulk of the work. So it actually makes it easier for you when you get there. And our experience has been that people that have gone through this process or a similar process that we have helped our clients with has a very good success rate of getting their permits without any delays versus getting kickback or delayed up there, because then that costs you money as well if you have delays by not complying with some of the stuff. So 1.6 is specifically to retail. So those that are doing retail kind of look at that component of it. If you're doing a distribution, it's 1.7 specific things. Now, some of the stuff are consistent with some of the top things, but as you know, wholesale businesses don't necessarily have POS systems, but there's metric and other things. So we're looking for different areas of requirements for specifically those types of functionalities. So if you have dual businesses, for example, as you know, if you're doing a retail and you're doing a distribution, then you got a combination of things that you need to do together. If you're doing a micro business and you meet the criteria for a micro business, then you know the requirements for all of them for that. But if you're just mixing and matching retail and distribution, retail and manufacturing, retail and cultivation, then you have a different component in here that you have to make sure you're including all the categories of the type of activities that you're doing into the application process. So that's it. I mean, that's the component, but like again, right here in 1.11, the micro business, again, consolidating everything. We've cited this section here, state law of what they're looking for, but we're also going to be looking at all the categories combined above, but they are uniquely different when you're all in one building or one facility on the same premises. So you'd have to identify those areas of reference in both state law, but also in the diagrams and the security plans that you're going to be submitting. And the labor and local enterprise component of this, you know, some of them things are required that you're looking at for labor requirements. The specific thing I want to point out here is the living wage. There's a living wage specifically for Riverside County. It's not minimum wage, it's living wage. So look at what the definition there is associated with that for your area as you are describing the different benefits that you are going to provide to employees. And the criteria is here as you are establishing your business model for employment and which benefits you're providing to the employees. And then here you'll see there's a description of the local ownership, because we do have an ownership form. Again, not being a competitive, but you're trying to demonstrate that you are a locally benefit business and that you're pouting or you're presenting that here's the criteria which defines that. And in the owner acknowledgement form, it's a 51%. So not only you have to have the 51% or more to be recognized as that total local ownership as a primary, but you also have to have been there prior to that date of May 1st, which is, I believe, the adoption of the time we had presented the ordinance to the council, the regulatory ordinance. And then neighbor compatibility, as you know, from the community of concerns regarding some of the areas that are critical for that. This is going to be critical for any concerns regarding the community that the council has wanting to have done. So you're going to make sure you describe these thoroughly as much as you can to the degree that will address the issues associated with each one of these subcategories affiliated with that. Same with the safety and security plan, same component, although the safety and security plan also has to comply with requirements at state level. We also want to be able to visually understand how your camera design, the safety of them, that they're professionally done by a security consultant. And again, if you have a question that comes up a lot is, well, we have an in-house security consultant. That is okay, as long as that it's done professionally done by a security consultant. If it's an in-house security person you have, the product should reflect that it is done by a security consultant. If you have a security consultant with a background or license, demonstrate the qualifications of that. That helps is important to that. But it doesn't have to be done in-house, but there are some businesses that do have in-house security consultants, so that's perfectly fine. It's more of the quality that we're looking for there. And then the premise diagrams, I think these are pretty much self-explanatory of how you need to present them. If there's any issues or questions regarding the diagrams, as you talk to the staff about some of the location that you have or what you got, you provide to us. If for some reason, notice here we have 11 by 17 scales or minimum scales. The purposes of this is for the quality of us to read it. So should you wish to modify this, we're okay with that as long as the quality of it is we can read it. If you submit diagrams and we can't see where the camera areas are, or we can't see things that you're trying to specifically point out to us because you just made it so small that we can't read it, any reasonable person can't read it, we're going to reject it and say, you're going to lose the points for that, and it might get you below your 80% or impact you. So emphasis on quality and legible and reasonably able to be read and reviewed for the purpose of scoring it. So description of the cannabis activity, not only in the application itself, but asks for that, but it's very important. As we mentioned to you, because if you do retail and it's secondary to the business, we need to know all the activities that are going to be provided, not for only the scoring, but the description of activity and where everything's going to be in your diagrams. And so we clearly know that you're meeting the premise separations for each one of the categories, be it a micro business or that you've got, again, a retail versus a distribution area that's all defined. And we know that specifically what your intent is for your license activities associated with that. All those are kind of self-explanatory. It's just filling out and completing the comments made associated with that. So the location, as you can see here, we point specifically is that we don't need necessarily everything reiterated, but some of the information that we're looking at location is going to be different here than what we're asking for in the neighborhood compatibility component of it. So we specifically point that out, that it is trying to focus on two different areas. You go, well, why am I just repeating what I just did in neighborhood compatibility? The answer is partially it is, but we're looking at for different things associated with here that we didn't do on the neighborhood compatibility part of it. Because we're addressing two different issues regarding location versus the compatibility and what you're doing to augment some of the things for the neighborhood compatibility. Then on the community benefit component of here, the city does have a tax. And as the city manager noted, they finally adopted or modified by resolution the tax rate. So it would behoove you to look at that and make sure you kind of understand what you're going to be subject to in the tax for the type of category in which you are going to be, what type of license you're going to be looking for. And but they also like to see the variations of what you're providing in the community and investing in the community. So it can be done in a variety of ways. All of you have a different mission, goal, kind of vision of what you see in there. But I think the important component here to look at is really the contribution of the value added of that. So when we review this, we are looking at the value added of what you're providing in there and the total totality of that above and beyond the tax. Now, you notice here it says another economic event incentives to the city. Though there is a tax, you got that, so you can look at what other contributions you're passionate about that maybe contribute to the total package that you provide. And it can be done various ways. Because this is not a competitive process, it doesn't mean that you're trying to outdo each other. It just means you look at what you as a goal meet, but at least you meet a criteria that you can demonstrate that there's value added to that community benefit and not just throwing something on there is just low level, not much significant of the total of what you're trying to achieve in this component of it. So with that said, I'm going to turn this back over to staff. We can answer questions at this time, I believe, but I'll let the city manager kick off that side of the process.
Thank you, David, for that extensive review. There were a couple individuals that, or at least one individual, Jim Fitzpatrick, that asked whether we would take any questions in the chat. With that being said, Brenda, on your side, are you able to unmute Mr. Fitzpatrick so that we can field his question?
Thank you, Chris. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Thanks, appreciate it. I did just send these two questions into the cannabis, so you'll have that as a record. But with the tax, it says that cultivation is per square foot and retail is a percentage. If you do a micro is there a compounding impact of cultivation and retail? Or so if the applicant grows something, do they get hit with the per square foot and then the percentage on retail? Or is it just the percentage on retail?
So I know we had a similar question come up previously. Stephen Graham, correct me if I'm wrong, but did we address this previously at one of our council discussions?
We did. Can you hear me, Chris? Yes. So the cultivation activity will be taxed at the cultivation rate, and the retail activity will be taxed at the retail rate. And so if I'm understanding your question correctly, Jim, it is when I cultivate cannabis, or when you cultivate cannabis, you will be taxed on that cultivation. And then when you sell it, you will be taxed on the sale.
So, Stephen, on that note, though, there's two scenarios to that. And that is if it goes wholesale versus retail. I think what Jim is referring to is that if you have a product that's cultivated and it moves to the end product through the retail, does it at the retail, that is the only selling point versus, for clarification of yours, if I sell some of my product to another business at wholesale, that is it sold based on the square footage, or is it a double tax on the same product going through the retail?
Okay, I understand then.
Yeah.
Dave, you're going to be the one who's going to be implementing that and auditing it. And obviously you have some experience with the complexities of it. Would you mind fielding the question then?
Sure. So one of the things, Jim, we haven't got to that point yet administratively, but an administrative rule typically would be written. And again, this is not proved, been vetted through council or discussed internally, but typically it would be the point of where it's going out of origin of sale. So if it's wholesale to another colleague or another business, then they would calculate it on the tax. If you're using a product to use it to go to your manufacturing function, to make it into an edible that's sold through the retail component of the business, it would be the point of the retail that either cultivation or manufacturing, if it goes to the retail, then it's basically a product sold by the retailer. And if it goes out through a wholesale component of it, then it would be taxed at the square footage. But again, that has not been presented to council administratively or put in an administrative procedure, which it could be done by a tax administrator. We'd have to look at how it's written, but that would be the general practice of that that needs to be vetted and processed.
Yeah, David, I'm confident that you understand it. I would encourage the city to clarify that, because we did lose somebody, because what was attractive is you could take those margins and sell it through retail, but as written, it looked like compounding. We did lose one group as a result of that ambiguity. And then my second question is on page 5 under phase 3 in the note paragraph, it says the cannabis business permit does not constitute a land use entitlement. Will there be a CUP required for this, or are there any other regulatory license permits necessary in the process?
So this is Chris. This question did come up at council discussion, and I'll have Stephen answer this one as well.
Okay, great. Jim, to answer that question, you're not going to require a conditional use permit for the cannabis use activity. But if you are building a structure in such a way that otherwise would require a CUP under the code, then you would need one. I'm not aware of any requirement for the type of building that we're sort of expecting here that would require a CUP. So that's not anticipated, but conceivably it's possible. But it wouldn't be for the cannabis activity. That is going to be purely under the regulatory permit.
Thanks, Stephen. That makes sense. And then probably just a business license then is one other requirement. Anything else besides that?
The business license is explicitly called out in the code. Any necessary building permits you have for whatever structures you're going to be putting on, those are what I anticipate here. I don't think of anything else off the top of my head that I'm expecting. Obviously, the state licenses too, but
At some point, you would clarify that. We're seeing a lot of cities get extend this process unnecessarily by not engaging with the state until later in the phase. So it's a science and an art of trying to get the two local and state regulatory schemes to mesh so that neither one's waiting on the other. But HDL is a pro at this and can guide you. Thanks for everybody's time. Good luck. Appreciate everybody's hard work.
Jim, thanks for the questions. And just to reiterate for those, I know you had one that we weren't able to answer completely. We will be able to follow up with you considering you did send that question to the cannabis email address that we have listed. So thank you, Jim. So with that being said, Brenda, I believe we've got Vince who would like to ask a question. Can you please unmute him? And then if there are anybody else that has questions, please raise your hand and we will get to you throughout this process. So Vince.
Everybody, thank you for having us. Just had a couple quick questions. Is there a limit to how many storefronts will be allowed for retail? Or how many micro businesses applications will be permitted?
This question did come up again. Stephen, you mind taking this one as well?
Sure. At this point, the city of Hemet does not have a maximum number of licenses that it is capable of issuing under its ordinance. The only cap that may exist is the city currently is accepting and issuing regulatory permits. The city will put a notice out 30 days before it closes that process. And then once the process is closed, there wouldn't be an opportunity to get more permits until the city opens it again. But no, there's no hard cap placed in the ordinance.
Got it. When applying for one of the retail's storefront, does it also come with a delivery capability? Or is that a separate entity?
There is no prohibition on delivery from your retail operation within the ordinance.
Okay, and then one other question, really. Does a park consist of a community center?
Chris, did you want me to take a stab at that one too?
Yes, please.
I don't quite understand the question. Are you talking about for the purposes of calculating sensitive use buffers?
Yeah, for instance, some of the areas that are mentioned that are acceptable for an application are CM, M1, and M2. Some of those locations are within 400 to 600 feet vicinity within a park. Wondering if that would be something that would consider as a sensitive use. Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think that we will have a look at that one and respond to that one via email because we want to make sure that our understanding of exactly what a sensitive use would be is very clear. And that's also something that'll be looked at through the property zoning verification review process as well.
Sorry, my last question is does there have to be a local owner and manager, or is that part of the point system where you'll be deducted if you don't have that as well?
Stephen, you want to take a stab at that?
Yes, and I know Dave perked up there too. You're not required to have local ownership. However, there will be points allocated for those applicants that have local ownership.
David, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, because it's not a competitive process. The purpose and intent of this is that if you're trying to brand or market yourself as a local owner of the business is defined by one or more individuals that own 51% or more. And where there's points, it just gives you extra points for that, just recognizing the local ownership. But we also want to make sure that what you're saying, then when you say we're a local owner, that you're truly legitimately meeting that criteria. If you're trying to, be telling the community or the council or anyone that you meet that definition. So if you don't get the local points, it's not going to be a significant amount of impact to you. You just won't get a perfect 100% score, but you could still meet the minimum barrier very, very very easy without, the 80%. So that's, it is
Is
not
there-
overemphasis on that.
Is there a specific number of allotted points that will be for the local ownership?
It's in that category. When you look at the category itself, which I believe is section 2. Let me get to that. Labor and local enterprise. There's a component in there that says local ownership. You'll see that there's 5 or 6 categories. So it's typically there's going to be a percentage of that. But if you lost points for that, if you just lost points for that, no other area specifically, you're going to be in the 90 percentile still as a
Thank you.
ballpark.
For fire, do they require sprinklers to be within the system for the fire department?
David, do you recall that specific question related to fire sprinklers?
You asking fire department or me?
And I'm sure that there's probably some development standards. So maybe Sarah Retmeyer, are you able to answer that question?
Sure, our local fire department doesn't make any local amendments to the fire sprinkler requirement. So it would be just based on the 2019 fire code, based on the size of building and ultimate use. If you're going to do manufacturing, if that would require any sprinklers for that size of building.
Thank you very much for answering all my questions. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Vince. And if you have any more questions, feel free to send them over to the email address that we have listed. There is a question related to zoning verification letter process and the requirements, and then also to where they can find the zoning verification. Actually, let me just ask it verbatim. Where can we find the zoning verification letter process and requirements? How do we send to the city? What does city need in the process? And that's from Jim. David, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I think as far as the form response to that, we're coordinating with staff on what to provide to you, but the question really has to do with you need to put in a request, could be by email, unless the city has a form that they've already provided, is really, here's the location, is it occupied, and APN number associated with that, so that they can research to make sure that property is going to meet the requirements. And oh, by the way, and the type of activity you're going to do. So if you're going to say, I'm going to do cultivation and retail, then you need specific of what it is to make sure it meets all that requirement. They will then take that information and process it to look at it versus like the other gentleman's question about, this property could be 400 feet. Well, we don't know what property is. So how do we know if it's 400 feet or 600 feet as a crow flies, or, walking path or whatever. So they need all that information of what that is. But what we'll do in the Q&A is we'll put the criteria needed for the zoning verification letter on the Q&A.
Thank you for that. I think that answered James's question as well. Another question, how will permits be issued? Highest points get first license, etc. Or is it first submitted and pass, first issued? David, you want to take that one?
So it's really about everyone's moving through the process and then, together. So it's a bandwidth issue for planning, which I think they can expand on, but it's also any challenges. Each location, each type of what you're trying to do by the property itself needs or limitations or additional information or extra plan reviews or modifications to plan reviews. All that stuff is typical construction related building code, fire code things that's going to move your product, your process through at different speeds and times. So the better you're prepared, as you would like any other project, the better off you're going to be on there, up to the point where, getting it to the city manager to approve it is, if you follow what we asked you to do, it's going to be a fairly quick process. It's everything after that is going to change that, and I defer to planning on, logistics and with COVID and staffing and resources of, how that moves along. So
HP, did you want to add anything to that comment that David made with respect to the CD staff?
Sure. Going back to the zoning verification letter, we do have an application for that. We will convert that to specifically asking for the cannabis component. So we'll have that application available and we'll upload it onto the website.
Thank you, HP. I don't see any other questions in the chat, and I don't see anybody else with their hand raised.
Chris, I do have a comment to, I think the gyms about any other requirements Stephen mentioned about anything. So Stephen, if somebody has a dirt lot and they want to build a structure on it, then that would be subject to a CUP?
I would depend on the structure itself. So I think that was, as far as the cannabis use goes, that's governed by the regulatory permit, right? There's no CUP required for a cannabis use. Now, if you're going to be building a structure that otherwise under the code, regardless of the use, would require a CUP, then you're going to have to go through that process. Generally speaking, I think for the type of structures we're anticipating here, I don't anticipate that being a requirement, but it's potentially, but it's not related to the use itself.
Okay, just want to make sure they're aware of that.
I did want to just follow up on the first question that we got from Jim, and it was regarding, getting that interpretation on how the taxes would work. We did just have the city council, they did just adopt the full tax ordinance that has all the processes and procedures in it. And like David referenced, there is the ability of the tax administrator to promulgate an interpretation rule and procedure. And so if anyone else has any other questions about how exactly the taxes are going to work, now would be a good time to get them in so that the tax administrator can put those interpretations out.
I do want to add to the CUP component. There's a question about building a new building on a vacant lot or dirt lot. CUP may not be required, but a site development review application is required for the building of construction of a new building. So that may be a minor or major, depending on the size and so on. So, and the zoning. So there is another entitlement component for building the actual building. And as Stephen has identified, it's separate from the cannabis component.
Right, so that requirement would exist whatever you were going to use the building for, is the point.
Thank you, HP. Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, David. Another question that showed up in the chat. Is there a date of when the application period will close? David, do you mind taking that one?
I think Stephen just kind of iterated, so I'd let him repeat that, what he had said about that.
Yes, so the application period has opened. The application period closing date has not been set. The city manager will have the authority to set a closing date. That date will be at least 30 days from when the notification that the closing is coming, and it will be put on the city's website. So keep an eye on the city's website because that's where answers to questions, additional information, and upcoming deadlines will be posted. But at this time, there is no closing date set. And if one is set, you will have at least 30 days notice on the website that that's coming.
Thank you, Stephen. Another question. Has the city designated different zones within the city? Have any zones been ruled out for licenses? And I'll just do a quick discussion on this and then quick hand it over to HP. We do have a zoning map that clearly conveys and shows where some of those locations are. You will obviously need to get your zoning verification letter, but we'll make sure that that map is uploaded to the website that everyone has been referencing. HP, did you want to add anything to that?
Sure. Specifically on section 18-525, it does identify commercial manufacturing, light limited manufacturing, and general manufacturing as the zoning which would allow cannabis type businesses. Again, those are the only sections currently that is allowed in the city. City has not added any additional zoning areas that could have cannabis business. So that's where it's limited, and we will reference the zoning map And it is on our website, it's just not available, or quick link to the cannabis section, but we can do a hyperlink to that so that you can get to our city zoning map.
Thank you, HP. And then obviously want to reiterate that you'll need to get that verification letter through community development. Another question came up. Is there a minimum separation requirement between each cannabis facility? David, Stephen, HP, whichever one wants to take that, go ahead.
I'll go for it. There is no minimum separation between cannabis businesses in Hemet's ordinance. No.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm not, okay, where do we send the zoning verification letter? David, did you want to take that, HP?
That goes to planning, so HP can.
Sure.
touch on that.
Once we have the application uploaded onto the website, you can go ahead and fill that out and submit it to planning division with the appropriate fee, and then we'll go ahead and process that.
And that information will be updated on the cannabis page of the website so that it's clearly articulated for everybody.
Yes.
Thank you, HP.
Chris, just one last comment, because I know we've had a few people might have jumped on late and have been focusing on retail. Just want to re-emphasize, look at the procedures on the limitations, that for those that are focusing on retail, you do have, it does have to be a secondary part of the operations. So it has to be no more than 40% of the licensed premises. So you must have, it can't be a standalone, it must have another licensed function with that, distribution and then retail, cultivation and retail, micro business, some other function, and it must be no more than 40% of the total license associated with that. So I just can't overemphasize that, the way the city's got it structured for those that came in late or been focusing on the retail component of this.
Thank you for that, David. And then to reiterate again, we will have this presentation uploaded to the cannabis, the city's cannabis webpage. So for those that were not able to join or are looking for more information, we'll obviously have this updated there. But then if there are any additional questions that come through, make sure you're using the email address that has been provided on the website. David, Stephen, HP, are there any concluding items that you would like to wrap up before we conclude this session?
I don't have anything further.
No, I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you for the feedback. We look forward to working with you.
And again, just to reiterate, the comment I mentioned about here, applicants should monitor the website. As Stephen had mentioned, is, you know, as we get questions, especially through email, as you move through this, you get some creative comments, issues, challenges that if you all want to benefit from them, I encourage you to keep looking at that at times. And, you know, I think the city may, we've had conversation about it, maybe randomly take their listserv from this group that's out there, any listserv, and maybe provide them and notify you that there are updates when they're in significant bunches. But it's still your responsibility to independently do that. And that, I appreciate your time, and good luck on getting through your projects.
Thank you, David. So with that being said, appreciate everyone's time today and look to the website for more information. So that concludes the orientation. Thank you all and have a good rest of the day.